Hello everyone, my name is Judy Hervey and I will be the instructor for our Pathophysiology Pharmacology course this fall. And it is very content heavy, as you can even see how many units the class is and how long the class is. However, nobody can sit for 4 hours and 40 minutes or 5 hours, whatever it is, for full lectures. So I would be breaking it up into chunks and I will be recording some of it. The very first recorded lesson I'm going to do is on our first chapter we're going to look at is Chapter 2, Genes and Genetic Diseases. And I wanted to start with just the need to know of DNA. What do we need to know? And some of this will be a review for some of you, but not all of this lesson will be a review. At any rate, we know a person's genetic makeup is determined at the point of fertilization, when the ovum and sperm unite. They're not differentiated until about 6 weeks, where we know it's going to be a male, and then 10 weeks for a female. But we do know that it is determined because of the way the biology, physiology works. It is determined at the point of fertilization. We also know that we have DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, located in the nucleus of the cell. And the nucleus of each of the germ cells, and that would be the sex cells, would be the ovum from the female and the sperm from the male. In the nucleus of each of those are chromosomes. Each chromosome contains DNA made up of thousands of segments called genes. The ovum and sperm contain only 23 chromosomes each. When they unite, the fertilized eggs has a total of 46 chromosomes. 23 pairs in the nucleus for a normal human being. Each cell, and this is capitalized, except the ovum and the sperm, have 46 identical chromosomes, and that would be our somatic cells, or our body cells. So males are heterozygous for the sex chromosome. Hetero meaning it's not homo, it's more than one, because they have an X and a Y chromosome. So they can make a sperm that has 22 autosomes and a Y chromosome for a boy, or they make a sperm that has 22 autosomes and an X chromosome for a female. Females always produce eggs with 22 autosomes and an X chromosome because that's what the females carry. Genes consist of certain sequence of nucleotides in the DNA, and the DNA has 3 components. We have a pentose sugar, which is the first one. It's deoxyribase. The second one, it has a phosphate molecule. And the third one are the 4 nitrogen bases. This is what makes up a DNA component. Again, the pentose sugar, the phosphate molecule, and the 4 nitrogen bases. We have the cytosine and the thymine, the C and the T that always pair together, and they are called pyrimidines, or pyrimidines. That's cytosine and thymine. The C and the T need to pair together. And then the other 2 nitrogen bases are called purines, and those are the A and the G, which is adenine and guanine. And those are double ringed, whereas cytosine and thymine are single ringed. The nitrogen bases form the rungs of the ladder that make up that DNA strand. Adenine and thymine are connected by 2 hydrogen bonds. Cytosine and guanine are connected by 3 hydrogen bonds. So they're a little bit different in how they connect, but other than that, they act basically very, very similar. They're housed on a chromosome like a street address, and the site is called a locus. And this is what contains the blueprints for proteins, or what we all end up actually looking like, even if we're related. Some of us don't look alike at all. The sequence determines which proteins are found in the cell, and these proteins determine the form and function of the cell. Genetic information flows from the DNA to the RNA. RNA nucleotides contain the nitrogenous bases adenosine, cytosine, and guanine. They do not contain thymine, which is replaced by uracil in the RNA single-strand molecule rather than the double-strand helix in the DNA. And it's considered the messenger. Okay, moving on. This may be a little new word for you unless you have a background in genetics at all. It's an allele is a variation of a gene or version of a gene that contains specific characteristics such as eye color and occupy corresponding positions on paired chromosomes. Again, one from each parent. Different forms of hemoglobin is an example where we got hemoglobin F, hemoglobin A, hemoglobin S. And then I wanted to talk about these two definitions of what a genotype versus a phenotype is. A genotype is what someone is genetically. It's what they've been given genetically. Set of genes in our DNA which is responsible for a particular trait. It's the genetic code within the cell. A phenotype is what's expressed, is what you actually look at when they are born. For example, hair color. It's a physical expression or what they demonstrate. An example for a genotype would be a PKU, and that stands for phenylketonuria. It's the inability to metabolize the amino acid phenylalanine. And if you look in the grocery store and foods, it's mandated in our United States here that every food they have to be able to tell you whether or not it has phenylalanine in it, because these people have a very hard time. They actually can become mentally disabled and so forth and so on if they don't know it's in it. So PKU is the genotype. If they end up if it's ignored and phenylalanine accumulates in the brain because they don't metabolize it like a normal person, they have brain damage or mental disability, that would be the phenotype because it's being expressed. But you can have a genotype not expressed, meaning they could have a PKU deficiency and not express it because people are giving them the right treatment or they're staying away from the foods with phenylalanine in. So a genotype is the information contained within two alleles, genetic makeup of an organism, and results in some physical characteristics of that organism. A phenotype is the visible characteristics of what you see: the eye, hair color, height, how your voice sounds, the way you act to certain diseases can be a genotype. Skin cancer prone to light skin, that would be a genotype I have, but I've not had skin cancer, so it hasn't been expressed yet. But I do have the genotype of the fair skin. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, now we'll look at the homozygous versus heterozygous. If both alleles are the same, and again, allele is a variation of a gene, then homozygous for that allele. Heterozygous if both alleles are different. Dominant genes are always expressed no matter what. A recessive gene isn't expressed unless a dominant gene isn't combined with it. You have to have two recessive genes to express it. Sickle cell anemia. When you have a capital S and a small s, it's not expressed. But because it's recessive, if you have two small s's, it will be expressed. So a carrier, again, genotypically abnormal, meaning they may carry the trait for sickle cell, but phenotypically they can be normal if the two small s's don't line up, if both parents don't have it. And here's again, carry sickle cell but recessive gene, so may not be expressed if another allele is healthy and dominant, however they are a carrier. Dominant genes are always written as a capital letter, recessive as a small letter. 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. And then let's talk about the single gene diseases, and these are what may be a little bit new for you. An example of autosomal dominant would be Huntington's. It's very rare. It's a single abnormal gene on one of the 22 non-sex autosomal chromosomes. That's why it's autosomal. It's not linked to an X or a Y from either parent. Only need one parent to pass the disease on because of the dominance. Autosomal recessive, again, it's going to be on the autosomal chromosome, so not linked to a sex chromosome. But because it's recessive, both parents have to carry it for you to end up with cystic fibrosis is an example of that. Again, autosomal dominant would be Marfan syndrome and Huntington's chorea. Autosomal recessive would be The best example I can come up with is cystic fibrosis, but also Tay-Sachs, which hopefully we'll watch in the movie. And that's spelled capital Tay hyphen capital Sachs. It destroys nerve cells. And then we've got the X-linked dominant. Fragile X syndrome is delayed development of speech by age 2, and they have severe cognitive impairment. The most common form of inherited mental retardation in males and can cause in females also would be the X-linked dominant, Fragile X syndrome. X-linked recessive, a lot of times is the red and green color blindness and hemophilia. And I made a little note down here, very few genes occur on the Y chromosome, and the reason why, if you look at the Y and the X, there's more room on the X. And so theoretically, that's what they say usually ends up happening. Okay, so X-linked dominant, only one copy of the disease on the X chromosome. Both male and female can be affected. Males may be more severely affected because they only carry one copy of the gene found on the X chromosome. Some X-linked dominant disorders are lethal in males. When a male is affected, all of his daughters will be affected because they only have the one X and it's affected. But none of the males. Females affected each pregnancy will have a 1 in 2, 50% chance to inherit this disease or variation of that gene. To cause a problem with the X-linked diseases in females, they must have 2 copies of the gene, 1 on each chromosome, and that's why the males are more susceptible to the X-linked diseases. For males, they just need 1 copy of the gene, so more affected in males. 22 are autosomal, 2 are sex-linked. We already talked about that. Rare to have the Y-linked genetic disorder, as very small and not much genetic information on that Y gene. I think I already said this. Yeah, in females, they'd be just a carrier if they have a healthy dominant X gene with the defective X recessive gene. Yeah. More boys are affected with the X-linked diseases. Color blindness and hemophilia is much more common with them. Yeah. X-linked genes are expressed in the male, whether dominant or recessive, as he only has the one X. Genes on the X chromosome cannot be passed on from the father to the son, as father can only give the Y chromosome, so that makes sense. Genes on the X chromosome are transmitted from father to all daughters because of the one X chromosome. Recessive abnormal genes on the X chromosome of a female may not be expressed because they are matched by a normal gene on the normal X. Example of X-linked recessive is Duchenne muscular dystrophy, affects males for obvious reasons. It's X-linked recessive, and they're the ones that get that one. Progressive muscle degeneration, usually unable to walk by age 10 or 12, affects heart and respiratory muscles. Absence of dystrophin, without which the muscles cannot survive. Okay, I think we're going to stop right here, and then we'll continue with the lecture in the next recording.